A starving puppy collapsed at a Mafia boss's feet. What he did next left everyone in shock. The alley was silent, too silent for a place that had just witnessed violence. Rainwater trickled down cracked concrete, washing away faint traces of blood, broken glass, and fear. A group of men stood frozen, their breaths visible in the cold night air, their eyes fixed on one man standing at the center of it all. Victor DeLuca, a name whispered in fear across cities. A man whose reputation alone could silence rooms and end arguments before they even began. His tailored black coat hung perfectly on his broad shoulders, untouched by the chaos around him. His expression, calm, cold, unreadable. At his feet lay a man who had dared to betray him. No one spoke. No one moved. They all knew how this would end. Victor slowly stepped forward, his polished shoe stopping inches from the trembling man on the ground. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. His silence was far more terrifying. Loyalty, Victor said quietly, his voice cutting through the air like a blade, is the only currency I value. The man on the ground tried to speak, but fear strangled his words. And then, something unexpected happened. A small, barely audible whimper broke through the tension. At first, no one reacted. It was so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind. But then it came again. A weak, desperate sound. Victor's eyes shifted, slowly, deliberately, not toward the man at his feet, but toward something else. From the shadows of the alley, a tiny figure stumbled forward. A puppy. Its fur was matted with dirt and rain, its ribs visible beneath thin skin. One of its legs dragged slightly as it walked, trembling with every step. It looked like it hadn't eaten in days, maybe longer. The men exchanged confused glances. What was this? The puppy took another step, then another. Its movements were unsteady, like it was fighting to stay upright. Its eyes, wide, glassy, filled with exhaustion, locked onto Victor. And then, as if its last ounce of strength had run out, it collapsed, right at his feet. The alley fell into a deeper silence. No one breathed, no one dared to react. Because everyone knew who Victor DeLuca was. And they all expected the same thing. Indifference. Or worse. Victor looked down at the fragile creature lying motionless near his shoe. For a moment, his expression didn't change. Not even slightly. Seconds passed. Long, heavy, uncomfortable seconds. One of his men shifted nervously. Another glanced away. This wasn't part of the plan. Nothing about this made sense. Victor, the man who had built an empire on ruthlessness, now stood over a starving puppy that had chosen the worst possible place, and person, to collapse in front of. Finally, Victor moved. He crouched down. The motion was so unexpected that one of his men nearly gasped. Victor DeLuca, kneeling, his gloved hand hovered just above the puppy, hesitating for the briefest moment before gently touching its side. The puppy didn't react. It barely breathed. "Boss," one of the men said cautiously, unsure whether to interrupt or remain silent. Victor ignored him. Instead, he slipped off his glove. Slowly, carefully, his bare hand returned to the puppy, this time more deliberate, more human. He placed 2 fingers near its neck. A pulse. Weak. Fading. But there. Something flickered in his eyes. Something no one in that alley had ever seen before. "Get the car," Victor said. The words were quiet, but firm. The men froze. Now, that single word snapped them back to reality. One of them immediately ran toward the street. Another stepped forward hesitantly. "What about him?" he asked, nodding toward the man still lying on the ground. Victor didn't even look up. "Handle it," he said simply. There was no emotion in his tone. But his focus had shifted. Completely. Gently, Victor slipped his hands under the puppy's fragile body. It was lighter than expected, alarmingly so. He lifted it carefully, as if it were made of glass. Rain dripped from his coat onto the small creature as he held it close. For a moment, he just stood there, holding it, watching it, as if trying to understand something. The car screeched to a stop at the entrance of the alley. The door flew open. Victor walked toward it without hesitation, the puppy cradled in his arms. The men parted instantly, making way for him. No one spoke. No one questioned. Because whatever was happening, they had never seen anything like it. The city lights blurred past as the car sped through the streets. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, but not in the way it usually was. Victor sat in the back seat, his coat slightly open, the puppy resting against his chest. One of his hands supported its head, while the other gently brushed away dirt from its fur. "Drive faster," he said. The driver nodded, pressing harder on the gas. "Where to, boss?" he asked. Victor didn't hesitate. The nearest vet. There was a brief pause. Then, there's one about 10 minutes away. 5, Victor replied. The driver didn't argue. The clinic door burst open, startling the receptionist behind the desk. She looked up, her eyes widening as Victor walked in, soaked from the rain, carrying what looked like a lifeless puppy. "We need help," he said. There was urgency in his voice. Real urgency. The receptionist didn't waste time. "Back room, now." A veterinarian rushed in moments later, quickly assessing the situation. "What happened?" she asked, already guiding Victor toward a table. "Found it," he replied. "That's not enough," she said sharply, checking the puppy's breathing. "It's severely malnourished, dehydrated, possibly injured. Can you save it?" Victor interrupted. The room went still. The vet looked at him. Really looked at him, not as a powerful man. Not as someone important, just as someone asking a question that mattered. "I'll try," she said. Victor stepped back reluctantly as they began working. Minutes felt like hours. He stood there, watching every movement, every adjustment, every attempt to stabilize the tiny life on that table. His hands were still, but his mind wasn't. Images flickered through his thoughts. A different time, a different place. A small boy sitting alone on a cold sidewalk. Hungry, ignored, invisible. A stray dog had once approached him. Just like this. Thin, weak, searching. And the boy, young Victor, had shared his only piece of bread with it. For the first time in days, he hadn't felt alone. The memory hit him harder than expected. "Boss," one of his men whispered from the doorway. Victor didn't respond. He couldn't look away. After what felt like forever, the vet finally stepped back. The room fell silent. "We stabilized him," she said. Victor exhaled slowly, tension leaving his body in a way he hadn't felt in years. "But he's not out of danger yet," she continued. "He'll need care, time, attention. I'll cover everything," Victor said immediately. The vet shook her head slightly. "This isn't just about money," she said. Victor met her gaze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he nodded. "I understand." Days passed. Then weeks. And something strange began to happen. Victor started visiting the clinic. At first, it was brief visits, checking in, asking questions, making sure the puppy was improving. But slowly, he stayed longer. He began sitting beside the small enclosure, watching as the puppy regained strength. It started eating again, walking again. Its eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to shine. The staff noticed the change. Not just in the puppy, but in Victor. He spoke less about business. Less about power. More about small things. How much did he eat today? Did he sleep well? Is he still limping? Questions no one ever expected to hear from him. One afternoon, the puppy, now slightly stronger, wobbled toward him as he entered. Its tail wagged weakly, but it wagged. Victor froze. The room seemed to hold its breath. The puppy reached him, then sat down at his feet. Looking up, waiting, Victor slowly crouched down, mirroring that moment in the alley. But this time, the outcome was different. He reached out, and the puppy leaned into his hand. Trusting, without hesitation. Something shifted again, deeper this time. "Looks like he's chosen you," the vet said softly from behind. Victor didn't respond immediately. His hand continued to rest gently on the puppy's head. "He doesn't even know me," Victor said quietly. The vet smiled faintly. "Sometimes," she said, "they don't need to." Victor looked at the puppy. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I'll take him." The mansion was silent when Victor returned that evening. Large, impressive, empty, but not for long. As he stepped inside, the puppy, now wrapped in a soft blanket, peeked out curiously. The guards exchanged confused looks. The staff froze. No one had ever seen Victor bring something like this home. He set the puppy down gently on the marble floor. For a moment, it hesitated. Then it took a step. Then another. Exploring. Alive. Victor watched closely. Not as a boss. Not as a feared man. But as someone witnessing something simple and meaningful. That night, for the first time in years, the mansion didn't feel so empty. And neither did he.